The rain hammered relentlessly against the tall glass windows of Carter and Associates, creating a rhythmic percussion that had become the soundtrack to Emma Richardson's late evening. The law firm occupied the entire 7th floor of a building that had seen better days, one of those structures in downtown Chicago that spoke of former grandeur, now faded by time and budget constraints. The radiators clanked and hissed, fighting a losing battle against the November chill that seeped through the old window frames like an unwelcome visitor. Emma sat at her desk, bathed in the soft blue glow of her computer screen, her fingers moving mechanically across the keyboard as she formatted yet another contract for review. The office around her was dark, except for the small pool of light from her desk lamp, creating an island of productivity in a sea of shadows. Most people would find the emptiness unsettling, but Emma had grown to appreciate these quiet hours after everyone else had gone home. At 28 years old, Emma Richardson had become a master of invisible efficiency. 5 years as a secretary at Carter and Associates had taught her every system, every preference of the 3 partners, every client quirk and procedural detail. She could anticipate needs before they were voiced, solve problems before they escalated, and maintain the professional machinery that kept the firm running smoothly. Yet despite her competence, or perhaps because of it, she remained largely unseen, her contributions acknowledged with brief nods and automatic thank yous that barely registered as human connection. Her workspace reflected her practical nature, a small desk tucked near the reception area, organized with military precision. A single photo frame held a picture of her parents taken 5 years ago, before her father's diagnosis, when their smiles still came easily. A small succulent plant sat in a hand-painted pot, a gift from her mother, who worried that Emma spent too much time at work and not enough time living. The plant was thriving, which Emma supposed said something about her caretaking abilities, even if her social life had withered to almost nothing. She glanced at the clock mounted on the wall above the reception desk. 9:47 p.m. The partners had left by 6, the paralegals by 7, and the other administrative staff by 8. Emma had volunteered to stay late to finish the Morrison contract revisions, though in truth she would have found another excuse to remain if this task hadn't existed. Her apartment, a cramped studio in a neighborhood that hovered between affordable and sketchy, held little appeal. Just 4 walls, basic furniture, and the kind of profound silence that amplified loneliness rather than providing peace. The city beyond the windows was a blur of lights and movement, even in the rain. Chicago never truly slept, but it did shift personalities as night deepened. The business district emptied of its daytime inhabitants, replaced by a different population. Service workers ending late shifts, people seeking entertainment in the theater district a few blocks away, and those who simply preferred the cover of darkness for their activities. Emma saved her work and leaned back in her chair, rolling her shoulders to release the tension that had settled there. She should go home. She should have left hours ago, actually. But something kept her rooted to this chair, in this office, as if leaving would mean confronting all the questions about her life that she'd been avoiding. When had she become this person? When had her dreams shrunk from becoming a lawyer herself to being satisfied with simply working near lawyers? She knew the answer, of course. It had happened gradually, like a slow erosion. Her father's cancer diagnosis in her junior year of college had been the earthquake, but the resulting landslide had taken years to fully manifest. The medical bills had been crushing. Even with insurance, the experimental treatments and specialist consultations had drained the family's savings and then some. Emma had made the decision to leave Northwestern, where she'd been studying pre-law on a partial scholarship, to take a full-time job and help her parents. It was supposed to be temporary, just a year, maybe 2, until they got back on their feet. But life had other plans. By the time her father was declared cancer-free, Emma had lost her scholarship, her momentum, and somewhere along the way, her certainty that she deserved more than what she had. The thought of returning to school, of accumulating debt for a degree she might not even complete, seemed impossibly risky. So she'd stayed at Carter and Associates, telling herself it was the practical choice, the responsible choice. The rain intensified, and Emma watched the droplets race down the window pane, merging and splitting in patterns that seemed almost purposeful. She thought about her college roommate Jessica, who had graduated on time and was now a junior associate at a prestigious firm in New York. Jessica's Instagram was full of photos from gallery openings, rooftop bars, and exotic vacations. They'd lost touch gradually, not through any animosity, but through the natural drift that occurs when lives diverge too dramatically. Emma's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Home yet, sweetheart? Don't work too late. You need to take care of yourself, too." She smiled despite her melancholy and typed back, "Leaving soon. Love you." It was a small lie. She'd probably stay another hour at least. Maybe 2. The office phone on her desk rang, shattering the contemplative quiet with its shrill, old-fashioned trill. Emma stared at it, her hand hovering uncertainly over the receiver. Who would be calling the office at this hour? Carter and Associates handled family law and estate planning, nothing that required emergency after-hours calls. The partners had their personal cell phones listed for urgent client matters. This main office line was for general inquiries and appointments, neither of which typically happened at 10 o'clock at night. The phone rang again, insistent. Emma's training kicked in. Always answer professionally. Always be helpful. She lifted the receiver. "Carter and Associates. This is Emma speaking. How may I help you?" Her voice was warm and professional, the product of thousands of similar greetings over the years. Silence greeted her, but not the silence of an empty line or a disconnected call. This was the heavy silence of someone on the other end, breathing, present, but unable or unwilling to speak. "Hello?" Emma tried again, her tone shifting to gentle concern. "Is anyone there?" More silence, but now she could hear it, the faint sound of breathing, slightly uneven, as if the caller was struggling with something internal. "If you need help, I'm here to listen," Emma said, surprising herself with the offer. This wasn't standard procedure. Standard procedure would be to disconnect and move on, but something in that silence spoke to her, resonated with her own loneliness. When the voice finally came, it hit her like a physical force. "I don't want to die alone." The words were spoken by a man, young, probably early 30s, with a voice that carried a strange combination of qualities. It was cultured and educated, the kind of voice that suggested private schools and good upbringing. But underneath that refinement ran a current of something darker, weariness, resignation, and a bone-deep sadness that made Emma's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. She sat up straighter, her mind racing through possibilities. Was this a prank? A wrong number? Someone in genuine crisis? I'm sorry," Emma said carefully, choosing her words with deliberate thought. "I think you might have reached a wrong number. This is a law office, not a crisis helpline. But if you're in immediate danger, I can give you the number for—" "I know where I called," the man interrupted, his voice quiet but firm, carrying an authority that suggested he was accustomed to being heard. "I need to talk to someone. Anyone. And you answered." Emma's heart began to pound. Every instinct told her this was abnormal, potentially dangerous. She should hang up, lock the office, and go home. This wasn't her responsibility. She wasn't trained for crisis intervention. But that voice, there was something in it that stopped her finger from pressing the disconnect button. "Are you hurt? Are you in immediate physical danger right now?" Emma asked, falling back on the basic triage questions she vaguely remembered from a workplace safety training years ago. "No," the man replied. "Not tonight, not this moment, but soon. Maybe a week, maybe a month. The clock is counting down, and when it reaches 0, I'll be alone. That's what scares me the most. Not the dying, I've made peace with that, but the being alone when it happens." The matter-of-fact way he spoke about his own mortality sent chills down Emma's spine. This wasn't the frantic rambling of someone in an acute crisis. This was the calm, measured speech of someone who had thought long and hard about their situation and come to a terrible conclusion. "Why do you think you're going to die?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The office suddenly felt colder, the shadows deeper. A long pause followed. Emma could hear the faint sounds of the city through the phone, distant traffic, the wail of a siren somewhere far away, the ambient noise of urban life that never truly ceased. "Because of what I am," the man said finally. "What I do. The life I've lived. I've made choices that set me on a path, and now I'm approaching the end of that path. I can see it ahead of me, like a cliff edge in the fog. I know it's there, even if I can't see exactly when I'll reach it." "That's very poetic," Emma said, unsure how else to respond, "but also very vague. I can't help you if I don't understand what you're dealing with." "You can't help me regardless," the man said, but there was no bitterness in it, just statement of fact. "I'm not calling for help. I'm calling because I realize today that when I die, there will be no one to mourn me, no one who actually knows me. I'll just be a name in a newspaper maybe, or a file closed by the authorities. The people around me fear me or need me or want something from me, but nobody knows me. Nobody sees past the role I play. Emma found herself leaning forward, drawn into this strange confession from a stranger. Everyone deserves to be seen, she heard herself say. Everyone deserves to be known as a person, not just a function. Do they? The man's voice carried a hint of bitter amusement. Even people who've done terrible things. Even people who've hurt others, destroyed families, made choices that can't be unmade. I don't know, Emma admitted honestly. I'd like to think that everyone has the capacity for redemption, that no one is beyond the reach of basic human compassion. But I also know that's probably naive. It is naive, the man agreed. But it's also refreshing. Most people in my life lost their naivety a long time ago, if they ever had it. What's your name? Emma asked, shifting in her chair. She glanced at the clock, 9:58 p.m. This conversation was becoming increasingly surreal. The man was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing the risk of sharing even this basic information. Does it matter? We'll probably never speak again after tonight. It matters to me, Emma said. If you're going to talk to me about dying alone, I'd like to know who I'm talking to. You can use a fake name if you want, but I need something to call you besides stranger on the phone. She heard what might have been a soft laugh, though it was hard to tell over the connection. Dominic, he said finally. My name is Dominic Russo. The name rolled off his tongue with a slight Italian inflection, suggesting heritage and history. To Emma, it was just a name. She had no context, no reason to recognize it as anything significant. I'm Emma, she replied. Emma Richardson. It's nice to meet you, Dominic, even under these strange circumstances. Nice to meet you too, Emma Richardson, Dominic said, and for the first time, she heard a hint of warmth in his voice, a brief crack in the wall of resignation. So, Emma said, settling back in her chair and making a decision that would change her life. If you're not calling for help and you're not in immediate danger, why don't you tell me why you think you're going to die? Maybe talking about it will help you see options you're not seeing right now. There are no options, Dominic said. I'm trapped by choices I made years ago, by expectations and obligations that don't have expiration dates, by enemies who have long memories and patient strategies. Enemies, Emma repeated. That's an interesting word choice. Most people would say, people who don't like them, or folks I've had conflicts with. You went straight to enemies. Because that's what they are, Dominic said simply. In my world, there's no middle ground. You're either allied, neutral, or an enemy. And the neutral parties are just waiting to see which side looks stronger. What world is that? Emma asked, though a part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Another long pause. Emma could almost feel Dominic weighing his words, deciding how much to reveal. A world most people only see in movies, he said carefully. A world that operates in the shadows of normal society. A world where loyalty is currency and betrayal is a sentence. Emma's stomach tightened. She wasn't naive. She understood what he was implying without him saying it directly. Are you involved in something illegal? That depends on your definition of illegal, Dominic said with dark humor. Technically, many things I do or oversee could be considered gray areas. Practically, yes. I'm involved in activities that would see me imprisoned if the right evidence reached the right prosecutors. Then go to the police, Emma said, her voice urgent. Turn state's evidence. Get protection. If you're in danger, the police can't protect me from this, Dominic interrupted. And turning evidence would only sign death warrants for people who depend on me. People who've been loyal, who've followed me because they had nowhere else to go. I'm not going to save myself by condemning them. So, you're just going to wait to die? Emma asked, frustration creeping into her voice. That seems like a waste. Of what? A life already wasted? Dominic's voice hardened slightly. Emma, I appreciate your concern, but you don't understand the situation. I'm not a victim here. I'm not some innocent person caught up in circumstances beyond their control. I chose this life. I've made decisions that have consequences. This is just the bill coming due. Everyone makes mistakes, Emma said. Everyone has regrets. That doesn't mean you deserve to die. You're very kind, Dominic said, his voice softening again. But you don't know what I've done, the people I've hurt, the families I've damaged in pursuit of power and profit. If you knew, you wouldn't be so quick to offer compassion. Try me, Emma challenged. Tell me the worst thing you've done. The silence that followed was absolute. Emma wondered if she'd pushed too far, if he'd hang up and she'd never hear from him again. Part of her thought that might be for the best. This conversation was straying into territory she had no business exploring. But another part of her, the part that had been dormant for years, the part that used to dream of being a lawyer and fighting for justice and truth, that part was fully awake now, engaged in a way she hadn't been in a long time. "No," Dominic said finally. "I won't tell you that. I want you to remember me as someone who was honest about being flawed, not as a monster who recited his sins to a stranger. Is that selfish?" "Maybe," Emma admitted, "but I understand it. We all want to be seen as better than our worst moments." "What's your worst moment, Emma Richardson?" Dominic asked, turning the question around with startling directness. Emma was caught off guard. She'd expected the conversation to remain focused on him, on his crisis. But his question made her confront her own life, her own regrets. "I gave up," she said quietly, surprising herself with the honesty. "My father got sick when I was in college. Cancer. I left school to help with medical bills and take care of him, which was the right thing to do. I don't regret that part. But when he got better, when the crisis passed, I didn't go back. I told myself it was about money, about practicality. But the truth is I was scared. Scared that I'd fail, scared that I wasn't as smart or capable as I thought I was. So I stayed in a safe job, in a safe life, and watched my dreams get smaller and smaller until they fit in the tiny space I'd carved out for myself. That doesn't sound like giving up," Dominic said thoughtfully. "That sounds like making sacrifices for your family and then struggling to find your way back to your path. That's human, Emma. That's not a sin." "Isn't it, though?" Emma said, feeling tears prick her eyes unexpectedly. "I had opportunities. I had talent. My professors told me I could be a great lawyer, and I threw it all away because I was too afraid to try again." "You're 28, Dominic said. "How do you know?" Emma blinked. "How did you mentioned you left college in your junior year, and that it happened 5 years ago," Dominic explained. "Simple math, and my point is, you're 28. That's not old. That's not the end of anything. You could go back to school tomorrow if you wanted to." "It's not that simple," Emma protested. "Why not?" "Money, time. I'm so far behind my peers now. And what if I'm not good enough? What if I was never as talented as people said, and I've just been protected from that truth by not trying?" "What if you are as good as they said?" Dominic countered. "What if you're letting fear rob you of the life you're supposed to have?" Emma laughed, but it came out as more of a sob. "That's rich? Coming from someone who called to say they're waiting to die." "Fair point," Dominic conceded. "We're both trapped, aren't we? You by fear of failure, me by the consequences of success. Both of us watching our lives slip away, unable or unwilling to change course." "This is the most depressing conversation I've had in years," Emma said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "And yet you're still on the phone," Dominic observed. "Why?" Emma thought about it. Why was she still on the phone with a stranger who'd called her office late at night? A stranger who'd admitted to criminal activities and claimed he was going to die soon? By any reasonable standard, she should have hung up 10 minutes ago. "Because you're the first person in a long time who's asked me real questions," Emma said finally. "Everyone else in my life, my parents, my co-workers, the few friends I still have, they all accept the surface version of me. They don't push. They don't challenge. You don't know me, so you don't have any investment in keeping me comfortable. And somehow that makes it easier to be honest." "I feel the same way," Dominic admitted. "Everyone in my life wants something or fears something. Every interaction is calculated, strategic, but you don't know who I am. You have no agenda. You're just present. Do you know how rare that is?" "No," Emma said. "I guess I don't." They talked for another hour, the conversation meandering through topics both profound and mundane. Dominic had a sharp, incisive mind and a surprising breadth of knowledge. He spoke about architecture with passion, could quote philosophy with ease, and revealed a love for jazz music that matched Emma's own secret appreciation for the genre. Emma found herself sharing things she hadn't told anyone. Her recurring dream of arguing a case before the Supreme Court, her habit of reading legal thrillers and critiquing the courtroom scenes, her guilty pleasure of watching old movies from the 40s where everyone spoke in rapid-fire dialogue and wore impeccable suits. "You have a romantic soul," Dominic observed at one point. "You see the world as it could be, not just as it is." "Is that a weakness?" Emma asked. "No," Dominic said firmly. "It's a strength. The world needs people who can see past the grim reality to the possibility of something better. I used to be like that, when I was young. Before everything. What changed?" Emma asked gently. I did, Dominic said. I became what I needed to be to survive, and then I became what people expected me to be, and somewhere in there, I lost the person I might have been. It's not too late, Emma said. You could change. You could walk away from whatever world you're in and start over. It's not that simple, Dominic said, echoing her earlier words back to her. Why not? Dominic laughed, a sound without much humor. Because I have responsibilities. People who depend on me. Enemies who would see any attempt to leave as a weakness to exploit. And honestly, I'm not sure I deserve a second chance. Everyone deserves a second chance, Emma said with conviction. Do they? What about people who've taken others' second chances away? What about people who've closed doors for others that they now want opened for themselves? Emma didn't have an answer for that. The conversation had ventured into moral territory too complex for easy answers. I should go, Dominic said finally, though he sounded reluctant. It's late, and you probably have to work tomorrow. I do, Emma admitted, glancing at the clock and seeing with shock that it was nearly midnight. But Dominic, will you be okay? For tonight, yes, he said. Tomorrow, next week, I don't know. But tonight, because of this conversation, I'll be okay. Can I ask you something? Emma said quickly, before he could hang up. Anything. Will you call again? If you need to talk? The silence stretched long enough that Emma thought she might have overstepped. Then Dominic spoke, his voice thick with emotion she hadn't heard before. Would you want me to? Yes, Emma said without hesitation. I know this is strange. I know you're a stranger and you're involved in things I probably shouldn't be anywhere near. But you're also a person who's hurting and alone. And I guess I'm a person who's hurting and alone too. Maybe we can be a little less alone together. You're extraordinary, Emma Richardson, Dominic said quietly. You know that? I'm really not, Emma said, feeling her cheeks warm despite being alone in the dark office. You are, Dominic insisted. Most people would have hung up the moment I said I was going to die. You stayed, you listened. You treated me like a human being instead of a problem to be solved or avoided. That's extraordinary. Call me tomorrow night? Emma asked, her heart racing. Same time? I will, Dominic promised. Same time. And Emma, thank you, for tonight, for listening, for being kind to someone who probably doesn't deserve it. Everyone deserves kindness, Emma said firmly. Even you, Dominic Russo. Especially you. The line went dead with a soft click. Emma sat in the silent office, the phone still pressed to her ear, her mind reeling from what had just happened. She'd spent over 2 hours on the phone with a stranger who'd admitted to criminal activities, who believed he was going to die, who'd somehow managed to see through her careful facade to the disappointed, lonely person underneath. It was insane. It was potentially dangerous. It was the most alive she'd felt in 5 years. Slowly, Emma replaced the receiver and began shutting down her computer. She gathered her coat and bag, her movements automatic while her mind was elsewhere. As she locked the office and took the elevator down to the lobby, she kept replaying moments from the conversation, analyzing Dominic's words, trying to understand what had just happened. The rain had lessened to a drizzle by the time she stepped outside. The Chicago streets were slick and reflective, the lights of the city creating distorted mirror images on the wet pavement. Emma walked to her car, parked in the small lot behind the building, her footsteps echoing in the quiet night. She sat in her car for a long moment before starting the engine, staring out at the city she'd lived in her whole life, but suddenly felt like she was seeing with new eyes. Somewhere out there was Dominic Russo, a man trapped in a dangerous life, counting down to an end he seemed to have accepted with resignation. And somehow, impossibly, their paths had crossed through a random late-night phone call. Emma started her car and drove home through the empty streets, her mind still processing everything. When she finally reached her small apartment and locked the door behind her, she realized she was smiling, actually smiling, for the first time in longer than she could remember. She didn't know what would happen tomorrow when Dominic called. She didn't know if this was the beginning of something or just a brief, strange interlude in her ordinary life. But for the first time in years, Emma Richardson felt like something in her life was changing, shifting in ways she couldn't predict or control. And instead of that thought terrifying her, it filled her with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt since before her father's diagnosis, before she'd given up on her dreams, before she'd resigned herself to a small, safe existence. As she got ready for bed, Emma caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized herself. Her eyes were bright, alive with something that had been absent for so long. She'd forgotten what it looked like. Hope. Tomorrow, Dominic would call again, and Emma would answer. And whatever was beginning between them, this strange, impossible connection across worlds that should never touch, it felt like destiny calling. She fell asleep with her phone on the nightstand, volume turned up so she wouldn't miss a call, and dreamed of a voice in the darkness telling her she was extraordinary. Emma woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through the gaps in her apartment curtains, and for a brief, disorienting moment, she couldn't remember why she felt different. Then it all came rushing back. The late-night phone call, the stranger named Dominic Russo, the 2-hour conversation that had felt both surreal and more real than anything in her recent memory. She reached for her phone instinctively, checking for missed calls or messages, though she knew that was irrational. Dominic had promised to call tonight, not this morning. Still, some part of her half expected to find evidence that last night had been a dream, a stress-induced hallucination brought on by too many late nights alone in the office. But her phone's call log showed the truth. An incoming call at 9:47 p.m. that had lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. It had happened. It was real. Emma got ready for work in a daze, moving through her morning routine while her mind replayed fragments of conversation. Dominic's voice saying her name, the way he'd laughed, rarely, but genuinely, at something she'd said, the vulnerability beneath his resignation when he spoke about dying alone. She arrived at Carter & Associates 15 minutes early, which was unusual even for her. The office was still mostly empty, just Mr. Carter himself brewing coffee in the small break room. He looked up as Emma entered, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "Emma, you're here early, and you stayed late last night. I saw your timesheet. You're not trying to make the rest of us look bad, are you?" His tone was teasing, but there was genuine concern in his eyes. Marcus Carter was a good man, a fair boss who actually noticed his employees, which made him a rarity. "Just trying to catch up on some filing," Emma said, which wasn't entirely a lie. She did have filing to do. She just had no intention of actually focusing on it today. "Well, don't burn yourself out," Mr. Carter said, handing her a cup of coffee without asking if she wanted it. He'd learned years ago that Emma took her coffee with just a splash of cream, no sugar. "You're valuable to us, but not so valuable that you should sacrifice your health. Take breaks. Leave on time occasionally. Maybe even use some of that vacation time you've been hoarding." Emma accepted the coffee with a grateful smile. "I'll try, Mr. Carter." "See that you do," he said, heading toward his office. "Oh, and Emma, the Morrison contract revisions looked perfect as usual. Well done." The compliment warmed her more than the coffee. But as soon as Mr. Carter disappeared into his office, Emma's mind drifted back to Dominic. Who was he really? What kind of life did he lead that made him so certain he was going to die? And why had hearing a stranger's loneliness resonated so deeply with her own? The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Emma went through the motions of her job, answering phones, scheduling appointments, preparing documents, but her heart wasn't in it. She kept glancing at the clock, calculating hours until 10 p.m. when Dominic had promised to call. Her coworker, Janet, noticed her distraction around lunchtime. Janet was in her 50s, a paralegal who'd worked at the firm for nearly 20 years, and had a maternal instinct she couldn't quite suppress around the younger employees. "You okay, honey?" Janet asked, appearing at Emma's desk with a concerned expression. "You seem a million miles away today." "I'm fine," Emma said automatically, then softened her tone. "Just didn't sleep well last night." "Boy trouble?" Janet asked with a knowing smile. Emma almost laughed. If only Janet knew. "Something like that." "Well, don't let some man mess with your head," Janet advised, patting Emma's shoulder. "You're too smart and too pretty to waste energy on someone who doesn't appreciate you." "Thanks, Janet," Emma said, meaning it, even if the advice didn't quite apply to her situation. The afternoon stretched on interminably. Emma found herself researching Dominic Russo during a quiet moment, typing his name into Google with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. What she found made her stomach tighten with anxiety. There wasn't much. Dominic Russo seemed to be someone who carefully managed his public presence. A few photos from charity galas and business functions showed a tall, dark-haired man in expensive suits, always positioned at the edge of groups, never the center of attention. His face was striking. Sharp jawline, intense dark eyes, the kind of features that photographers probably loved, but that carried an edge of danger that made Emma's pulse quicken. Articles mentioned the Russo family in the context of Chicago's business community, real estate holdings, construction contracts, a chain of upscale restaurants, all legitimate on the surface. But there were other articles too, older ones that spoke in careful language about alleged connections and suspected ties to organized crime. Nothing concrete, nothing that directly accused, but enough to paint a picture of a family that operated in gray areas. One article from 5 years ago reported the death of Antonio Russo, Dominic's father, in what was described as a home invasion gone wrong. The article noted that Dominic, then 27, had taken over the family's business interests. There was a photo accompanying the article, Dominic at his father's funeral, his face a mask of composure that didn't quite hide the grief and something else, determination maybe, or rage carefully controlled. Emma closed the browser window, her hands trembling slightly. This was real. Dominic wasn't exaggerating or being dramatic. He came from a world that most people only glimpsed in movies and television shows, a world where people died in home invasions that probably weren't home invasions at all. And yet the man she'd spoken to last night hadn't sounded like a gangster or a criminal mastermind. He'd sounded like a lonely, tired person who'd made choices he regretted and now felt trapped by them. He'd sounded human. Emma spent the rest of the afternoon in a state of nervous anticipation mixed with genuine fear. What was she doing? What was she thinking? Agreeing to continue talking to someone involved in organized crime. She should call the police. She should block any future calls. She should pretend last night never happened and go back to her safe, predictable life. But she knew she wouldn't do any of those things. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, most of the office had cleared out. Emma stayed at her desk, pretending to work while actually just watching the clock. Janet stopped by on her way out. "Still here? Emma, honey, you really need to get a life outside this office." "I know," Emma said with a rueful smile. "Soon, I promise. I'm going to hold you to that," Janet said, grabbing her coat. "See you tomorrow." The office emptied completely by 6:30. Emma was alone again, just like last night, waiting in the gathering darkness for a phone call that might change everything or might never come at all. What if Dominic didn't call? What if last night had been a momentary weakness he now regretted? What if he'd realized that talking to a stranger was too risky, too exposing? Emma tried to distract herself with actual work, but her eyes kept drifting to the phone on her desk. 7 o'clock came and went, then 8, then 9. By 9:30, Emma had convinced herself that Dominic wasn't going to call. It had been a one-time thing, a brief connection that had burned bright and then extinguished, leaving her back in her ordinary life with nothing but a strange memory. She was gathering her things to leave, feeling a crushing disappointment that seemed disproportionate to the situation when the phone rang at 9:43 p.m. Emma lunged for it, her heart hammering, then forced herself to take a breath before answering. Professional, calm, even though she felt anything but. "Carter and Associates, this is Emma speaking." "You stayed." Dominic's voice came through the line and Emma could hear the relief in it, the almost disbelieving gratitude. "I thought maybe you wouldn't. I thought maybe you'd realize how crazy this is and decide to avoid me." "I thought about it," Emma admitted, sinking into her chair. "I spent most of today thinking about it, actually. I even looked you up online." "Ah." A long pause. "And what did you find?" "Enough to know that you weren't exaggerating last night. About the life you lead, the world you're part of. Are you scared?" Dominic asked quietly. Emma considered the question honestly. "Yes, but not of you, exactly. I'm scared of what being connected to you might mean, but I'm more afraid of going back to how I was before last night. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Dominic said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I felt the same way all day. I went through my usual routine, meetings, phone calls, decisions that affect dozens of people, but all I could think about was tonight. This call, hearing your voice again." "How was your day?" Emma asked, then immediately felt foolish. It seemed like such a mundane question given the circumstances, but Dominic answered as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Long, complicated. I had to deal with some business issues that required delicate handling, but I got through it by reminding myself that I had something to look forward to at the end of it." "Me?" Emma asked, her voice small. "You," Dominic confirmed. "This. Whatever this is that we're doing." "What are we doing, Dominic?" Another pause. Longer this time. When Dominic spoke again, his voice was careful, searching. "I think we're being honest with each other in a way that neither of us can be with anyone else in our lives. I think we're finding connection in the most unlikely circumstances, and I think we're both lonely enough to take a risk that probably isn't smart." "That's a pretty accurate assessment," Emma said with a small laugh. They talked for hours again that night. The conversation flowed even more easily than it had the first time, as if they'd established a rhythm, a shared language. Dominic asked about Emma's day, and she found herself telling him things she wouldn't normally share with anyone. Her frustration with the limitations of her job, her fears about being stuck forever, her complicated feelings about her parents' well-meaning concern. "They love you," Dominic observed. "Your parents. That's clear from the way you talk about them." "I know they do," Emma said. "That almost makes it harder. They sacrifice so much for me, and I feel like I'm letting them down by not living up to my potential." "Have you told them that?" "No. They'd just tell me I'm being too hard on myself, that they're proud of me no matter what, which is sweet, but not particularly helpful." "Maybe they're right, though," Dominic suggested. "Maybe you are being too hard on yourself. You're 28, Emma. You have your whole life ahead of you. You can still become a lawyer if that's what you want." "What about you?" Emma challenged. "You're 32. You have your whole life ahead of you, too. You could walk away from your world and start over." "It's different," Dominic said. "How?" "Because I've done things that can't be undone, made choices that have permanent consequences." "You're just delayed. I'm trapped?" Emma supplied. "Yes," Dominic admitted. "Trapped. By my own actions, by other people's expectations, by systems I helped create and now can't dismantle without hurting people who don't deserve to be hurt." "Tell me about them," Emma said. "The people who depend on you." Dominic was quiet for a moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "There are dozens of families whose livelihoods are connected to the businesses I run. Some of them are involved in the less legitimate aspects, but many of them just work for the restaurants or the construction company or the real estate firm. They have kids, mortgages, normal lives. If I walked away carelessly, if I let everything collapse, they'd suffer. So you feel responsible for them." "I am responsible for them," Dominic corrected. "Whether I wanted that responsibility or not, I have it now. My father built this empire, and when he died, it became mine, along with all the obligations and complications that come with it." "Do you resent him for that?" Emma asked gently. "Your father?" The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. When Dominic finally spoke, his voice was thick. "Every day. I resent him for grooming me for this life from the time I was a teenager. I resent him for not giving me a choice. I resent him for getting himself ended and leaving me to deal with the consequences. But I also," he paused, "I also love him, miss him. Wish I could talk to him one more time, even if it was just to tell him how angry I am." "It's okay to feel both things," Emma said softly. "Love and resentment aren't mutually exclusive. Do you resent your father for getting sick and changing the trajectory of your life?" Emma had never admitted it out loud, had barely admitted it to herself, but something about Dominic's honesty compelled her own. "Sometimes. Not for getting sick, he couldn't help that. But for being so grateful afterward, so proud of what I gave up, that I couldn't bear to tell him I wanted my old life back. He kept saying I was his hero, that he didn't know what they would have done without me. How could I tell him that being a hero felt like prison?" "So we're both trapped by love," Dominic observed. "By not wanting to disappoint or hurt the people we care about." "I guess we are." The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that. Books they'd read, movies they loved, places they dreamed of traveling. Emma learned that Dominic had never left the country despite his family's wealth, too caught up in business obligations to take real vacations. She told him about her semester abroad in London that had been cut short by her father's diagnosis, and how she still dreamed of going back someday. "What would you do if you could do anything?" Dominic asked at one point. "If there were no obstacles, no responsibilities, no fear, what would your life look like?" Emma thought carefully. "I'd finish my degree, become a lawyer, maybe a public defender, someone who helps people who can't afford good representation. I'd have a small apartment overlooking the water somewhere, with big windows and lots of light. I'd travel on weekends, try new restaurants, maybe learn to paint or play an instrument, and She hesitated. "What?" Dominic prompted gently. "I'd have someone to share it with. Not just a boyfriend or husband, though that would be nice too, but someone who really knew me. Someone I could be completely honest with. Someone who saw all my flaws and fears and still thought I was worth knowing." "You're worth knowing, Emma," Dominic said, his voice intense. "I've talked to you for a total of maybe 5 hours and I already know that. You're intelligent, compassionate, honest in a way that's rare. Any person would be lucky to have you in their life." Emma felt her eyes sting with unexpected tears. "You barely know me. I know you better than most people know their friends of years," Dominic countered. Because we're not performing for each other. We're not trying to impress or manipulate or maintain some image. We're just real. What would your life look like? Emma asked, turning the question back to him. In that perfect, no obstacles scenario? Dominic took a long time to answer. I'd wake up in the morning without immediately thinking about threats and strategies. I'd run a legitimate business, maybe the construction company. I actually enjoy that work. I'd have a normal home, not a fortress. I'd be able to walk down the street without bodyguards or constantly scanning for danger, and I'd have someone who knew all the terrible things I've done and somehow loved me anyway, which is probably an impossible ask. It's not impossible, Emma said. Everyone deserves love, even people who've made mistakes. These aren't mistakes, Emma. Mistakes are accidents. I made choices. Then everyone deserves a chance at redemption, Emma amended. Everyone deserves the opportunity to be better than they've been. Do you really believe that? Dominic asked, something vulnerable in his voice. I do, Emma said firmly. I have to believe it. Because if I don't believe people can change, can be better, then what's the point of anything? They talked until well past midnight again. Finally, reluctantly, Dominic said he had to go, an early meeting he couldn't avoid. But before hanging up, he said something that made Emma's heart race. I want to meet you. In person. Emma's first instinct was to say yes immediately, but fear held her back. Dominic, I don't know if that's a good idea. I know it's not, he said. I know I'm asking you to cross a line, but Emma, you've become real to me in a way that nothing else in my life is. These conversations are the only genuine interactions I have, and I need to see that you're real, that this is real. I am real, Emma said, her voice shaking slightly. Then prove it. Meet me. Just once. I promise you'll be safe. I'll make sure of it. Every rational thought Emma had screamed that this was dangerous, reckless, potentially life-altering in the worst possible way. Meeting a man involved in organized crime, even in a public place, was beyond foolish. But Emma had spent 5 years being rational and careful, and it had left her hollow. For the first time since her father's illness, she felt alive, felt like she mattered, felt seen. And she wasn't ready to let that go. Where? She heard herself ask. There's a cafe downtown. Moreno's on the corner of State and Monroe. Do you know it? I've passed it but never been inside. Tomorrow, noon. I'll arrange for privacy. Just you and me, Emma. No one else. How will I know it's you? You'll know, Dominic said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Trust me, you'll know. After they hung up, Emma sat in the dark office for a long time, processing what she'd just agreed to. Tomorrow at noon, she would meet Dominic Russo in person, a man she'd only spoken to twice for a total of maybe 6 hours. A man involved in dangerous activities she didn't fully understand. A man who believed he was going to die soon. It was insane. It was reckless. It was possibly the most dangerous thing she'd ever done, and Emma couldn't wait. She went home and barely slept, her mind cycling through possibilities. What would Dominic look like in person? Would the connection they'd felt over the phone translate to face-to-face interaction? What if seeing each other shattered the spell, made them realize they'd built up something that didn't actually exist? The next morning, Emma called in sick for the first time in 3 years. Mr. Carter sounded concerned. Emma never called in sick, but she assured him it was just a mild cold, nothing serious. She'd be back tomorrow. The lie tasted bitter, but she pushed past it. She spent the morning changing outfits repeatedly. What did one wear to meet a mob boss for coffee? Professional but not stuffy. Casual but not sloppy. She finally settled on dark jeans, a cream-colored sweater, and her nicest coat. Understated but pulled together. She left her hair down, applied minimal makeup, and tried not to think too hard about why she cared so much about her appearance. By 11:30, Emma was downtown, circling the block where Moreno's was located. The cafe was in a nice area, surrounded by office buildings and upscale shops. It looked expensive but not ostentatious. Exactly the kind of place someone like Dominic would choose. At 11:55, Emma took a deep breath and pushed open the cafe door. The space was beautiful. Exposed brick walls, warm lighting, the rich smell of coffee and fresh pastries. And it was completely empty except for a single man sitting at a corner table, his back partially to her but his posture unmistakable even from behind. Dominic Russo stood as she entered, and Emma's breath caught. The photos online hadn't done him justice. Dominic was tall, at least 6'2", with the kind of build that suggested strength without bulk. His dark hair was styled with casual precision, slightly longer on top, and his face was all sharp angles and intensity. He wore charcoal gray dress pants and a black button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing tanned forearms. No tie, no jacket. Business casual that probably still cost more than Emma's entire wardrobe. But it was his eyes that captured her. Deep brown, almost black, and filled with an intelligence and intensity that made her feel simultaneously seen and analyzed. There were shadows under those eyes, evidence of sleepless nights, and a faint scar above his left eyebrow that the photos hadn't shown. "Emma," he said, and hearing her name in that voice, in person, sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Dominic," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. They stared at each other for a long moment, the weight of their connection hanging in the air between them. Emma noticed details the photos hadn't captured, the way he held himself, controlled but with an undercurrent of tension, like a coiled spring, the slight upturn at the corner of his mouth that suggested he wanted to smile but had forgotten how, the way his hands were relaxed at his sides but she could see the faint scars on his knuckles that spoke of violence she didn't want to think about. "You're more beautiful than I imagined," Dominic said finally, his voice soft, almost reverent. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "And you're less terrifying than I expected." This time he did smile, a real smile that transformed his face completely, making him look younger, more vulnerable, almost boyish despite his obvious maturity. "That's because you bring out the part of me I thought was dead." He gestured to the chair across from him and Emma sat, her legs suddenly unsteady. A moment later, a waiter appeared, young, nervous-looking, with coffee and an array of pastries. "I didn't know what you liked," Dominic explained, "so I ordered several options. The owner prepared everything fresh this morning." "The owner?" Emma asked, reaching for the coffee. "Antonio. He's owed me some favors. I called them in to ensure we'd have complete privacy." Emma glanced around the empty cafe. "Your men are outside." "Two of them," Dominic confirmed. "They won't come in unless I signal. This is just us, Emma. Just you and me, like I promised." Emma wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, needing something to ground her. Being in the same physical space as Dominic was overwhelming in ways she hadn't anticipated. His presence was magnetic, commanding without being aggressive. She could feel the air between them charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. "I was nervous all morning," Emma admitted. "I changed clothes 5 times. "I was nervous too," Dominic said, and the confession surprised her. "I almost called to cancel twice, talked myself into coming, then out of it, then back in again." "Why?" "Because part of me was terrified that seeing each other in person would ruin what we've built over the phone. That you'd look at me and see only what I am, not who I am. That I'd look at you and realize I'd built you up in my head to be more than any real person could be." "And?" Emma asked, holding her breath. Dominic leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. "And you're more real than I imagined. More genuine. Seeing you here in person doesn't diminish what I felt on the phone. It amplifies it." Emma set down her coffee cup because her hands were trembling. "I feel the same way. I thought maybe the connection was just, I don't know, the safety of distance. But you're here, and it's even stronger." "Tell me about your week," Dominic said, settling back in his chair but keeping his eyes on her. "Beyond our phone calls. What did you do? How did you feel?" So Emma told him, about her research into his background, about Janet's concern, about Mr. Carter's gentle reminder to take vacation time. She told him about the moments during the workday when she'd found herself smiling for no apparent reason, and how her co-workers had noticed the change. "You seem different," Dominic observed, "from what you described before. More alive." "I feel different," Emma admitted. "You've reminded me that there's more to life than just existing, that connection matters, that being truly known by another person is worth risking safety and predictability." "I've done the same for myself," Dominic said quietly. "These conversations with you have been the first time in years I've been able to just be. Not the boss, not the heir, not the man with all the responsibilities and threats. Just Dominic." "Tell me about the threats," Emma said, leaning forward. "You mentioned last time that something specific made you reach out. What happened?" Dominic's expression darkened, and Emma saw the mask slip into place, the guarded, careful face he must show the world. But then he seemed to consciously push it away, choosing vulnerability instead. "I got intelligence that someone close to me is planning to move against me. A betrayal from within my organization." I don't know who yet, but I know it's coming. And when I realized that, I also realized that if they succeed, there would be no one to mourn me as a person. People would mourn the position, the power vacuum, the loss of leadership, but not me. Not Dominic Russo, the human being who likes jazz music and philosophical debates and has dreams of a different life. And now? Emma asked softly, reaching across the table but stopping just short of touching his hand. Dominic closed the distance, his fingers intertwining with hers. His hand was warm, strong, and Emma felt a jolt of electricity at the contact that went straight to her core. Now I have someone who knows my name, who's seen my face, who talks to me like I'm worth knowing. That's infinitely more than I had before. They sat like that for a moment, hands joined across the table, the intimacy of the gesture both terrifying and perfect. This can't end well, Dominic said, his voice rough. You understand that, right? I'm a marked man. Everyone around me is potentially in danger. By being here with me, by continuing these conversations, you're putting yourself at risk. I know, Emma said, surprising herself with how calm she sounded. I thought about that all night, about how smart people would tell me to run, how this is probably the most reckless thing I've ever done. But Dominic, I've spent 5 years playing it safe, and it's left me hollow. Maybe it's time I took a risk. Maybe you're worth the risk. Dominic's grip on her hand tightened. Why? Why would you risk everything for someone like me? Because you're not just someone like you, Emma said firmly. You're a person who's trapped in a life you didn't choose, trying to do right by people who depend on you, struggling with regrets and fear and loneliness. You're human, Dominic. Deeply, complexly human. And you asked me not to let you die alone. How could I walk away from that? You could walk away very easily, Dominic said, though his tone suggested he was grateful she wasn't. You could recognize that I'm dangerous to know, that my world has consequences you don't want any part of, and you could go back to your normal life. Except I don't want my normal life anymore, Emma said. You've shown me that. You've woken something in me that I thought had died. The part that wants more, that's willing to fight for it, that believes in second chances and redemption. I don't know if I can be redeemed, Dominic admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But you want to be, Emma said. That's what matters. You want to be better. You want to find a way out. That desire for change is the first step. And if I can't change, if I'm too deep, too compromised, then we'll figure it out together, Emma said, and meant it. Dominic stared at her as if she were some kind of miracle, something he couldn't quite believe was real. Then slowly he brought her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, courtly, and it made Emma's heart race. You're extraordinary, Emma Richardson, Dominic said against her hand. Absolutely extraordinary. They talked for hours in that empty cafe, coffee growing cold and pastries forgotten. The conversation ranged from profound to mundane, from their deepest fears to their favorite childhood memories. Dominic told her about growing up in a house that was more fortress than home, about the burden of being groomed for leadership from age 15, about the moment he realized he couldn't escape the path his father had laid out for him. Emma told him about her dreams of arguing cases in court, about her complicated relationship with ambition, about the guilt she carried for resenting a father who'd done nothing wrong except get sick and love her enough to be proud of her sacrifices. As afternoon light filtered through the cafe windows, casting warm patterns on their table, Emma realized this was the most honest conversation she'd ever had, with anyone, ever. I should go, Dominic said finally, though he made no move to release her hand. I have meetings I can't avoid, business that requires my attention. When will I see you again? Emma asked, hating how needy the question sounded. Soon, Dominic promised, as soon as I can arrange it safely. But Emma, I need to be honest with you about something. What? The situation I'm in, the threat I mentioned, it's escalating. I'm going to have to handle it, and that might mean I'm less available for a while. It might mean things get complicated. Define complicated, Emma said, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. It means I might have to do things I'm not proud of, make moves that good people would condemn, handle problems in ways that can't be undone. He paused, his eyes searching hers. I won't involve you in any of it. I won't tell you details. But I need you to understand that the part of my life you see, the part I share with you, is separate from the part that handles business. And I need you to be okay with that separation. Emma considered this carefully, He was essentially asking her to accept that he would continue to operate in his dangerous world while maintaining their connection. He was asking her to not ask questions, to not demand explanations, to trust him despite not knowing everything he did. It should be a deal breaker. Emma knew that. Any rational person would recognize the red flags and walk away. But Emma had stopped being purely rational the moment she answered that first phone call. "I can accept that," she said slowly. "As long as you promise me two things. Anything. First, promise that you'll do everything you can to survive, that you won't just accept death as inevitable, that you'll fight for a chance at something different." "I promise," Dominic said immediately. "Meeting you has given me a reason to fight that I didn't have before. Second, promise that you'll keep talking to me, that even if things get complicated, even if you're dealing with problems you can't share, you won't shut me out completely. I can handle not knowing details. I can't handle losing this connection." Dominic stood up, drawing Emma to her feet as well. He cupped her face in both hands, his touch gentle despite the obvious strength in those scarred hands. "I promise," he said, his face inches from hers. "I'll call you every night that I'm able. I'll see you every chance I can safely arrange it. And Emma, I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I already have. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But it's true." Emma's breath caught. "I'm falling for you too. That's what makes this so terrifying." Dominic leaned down, and for a moment Emma thought he might kiss her. Instead, he pressed his forehead to hers, breathing her in, holding her with a tenderness that seemed at odds with everything she knew about his life. "I should go," he whispered. "I know," Emma whispered back. But neither of them moved for several long seconds, unwilling to break the spell of this moment. Finally, Dominic stepped back, his hand sliding from her face to briefly squeeze her shoulders before falling to his sides. "I'll call you tonight," he said. "I'll answer," Emma promised. She watched him walk to the door, watched him pause to look back at her one more time with an expression that held so much longing and fear and hope that it made her chest ache. Then he was gone, disappearing into the Chicago afternoon with two men in dark suits falling into step beside him. Emma sank back into her chair, her legs suddenly weak. She'd just had coffee with a man involved in organized crime. She'd held his hand, looked into his eyes, felt her heart open in ways she'd thought impossible. She'd was falling, in love with someone whose world could destroy them both. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was possibly the biggest mistake of her life. But as Emma finally left the cafe and walked back to her car, she realized she was smiling. Really, genuinely smiling in a way she hadn't in years. Because for the first time since she'd given up her dreams, Emma Richardson was choosing something for herself, something dangerous and uncertain, and probably ill-advised, but something real, something that made her feel alive, and that was worth any risk. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of secret meetings and late-night phone calls that became the center of Emma's existence. Her carefully structured life unraveled as she was pulled deeper into Dominic's world. Not the dangerous business he managed, but the private space he carved out just for them. They met in places Dominic deemed safe, an art gallery after hours, where they walked through empty halls discussing the paintings in hushed voices, a private dining room in one of his family's restaurants, where the staff knew not to disturb them. Once, memorably, on the rooftop of a building Dominic's company owned, where they watched the Chicago skyline glitter against the December darkness, while wrapped in thick blankets against the cold. Emma learned to read Dominic's moods in ways she'd never learned to read another person. She could tell when a meeting had gone badly by the tension in his shoulders. She knew he was worried about something when he would go quiet mid-conversation, his eyes distant. She recognized the nightmares in his voice when he called her at 3 a.m, needing to hear something good, something real, something that reminded him there was more to life than the constant calculations of survival. And Dominic learned about her. The way she twisted a strand of hair around her finger when she was thinking hard about something. How she laughed with her whole body when something genuinely amused her. The sharp intelligence she'd been forced to hide in her secretary role, now blooming in their conversations about law, ethics, and philosophy. But despite these moments of connection, Emma could feel something dark approaching. Dominic's phone rang more frequently during their time together. His security detail expanded from 2 men to 4. He started checking exits wherever they went, his body language shifting to high alert at unexpected sounds. "It's getting closer," Dominic told her one evening as they sat in his car in an empty parking structure. December had arrived with brutal cold, and frost formed delicate patterns on the windows. The threat I mentioned. My people have confirmed it. Someone in my inner circle is working against me. Emma reached for his hand in the darkness. Who do you suspect? I have 3 men close enough to know my movements and schedules, Dominic said, his jaw tight with tension.
Vincent, Marco, and Tony. I've known them for years, trusted them with my life, and now one of them is planning to betray me. What will you do when you find out who it is? Emma asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Dominic's silence told her everything. In his world, betrayal had consequences she didn't want to think about. There has to be another way, Emma said, even though she knew how naive it sounded. Some way to handle this without…
Without what? Dominic turned to her, his eyes reflecting the dim light. Emma, in my world, showing mercy to betrayal is signing your own death warrant. If I hesitate, if I'm seen as weak, I'm finished. Everyone I'm responsible for is at risk. This is why you wanted out, Emma said quietly. This is exactly why you called that night. I've been trapped in this life since I was 17, Dominic said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. I tell myself I'm protecting my family's legacy, providing for people who depend on me. But the truth is, I'm just continuing a cycle I don't know how to break. And now it's threatening everything, including you. Then break it, Emma urged, gripping his hand tighter. Walk away. We could both leave Chicago, start over somewhere else. Dominic cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. Emma, I can't just disappear. The people who want me gone won't stop hunting me. My own organization would see it as abandonment and come after me. And if I run, everyone I care about becomes a target to draw me out, including you. So what's the alternative? Wait for someone to make a move against you? Find the traitor first. Deal with the threat. Then, he paused as if afraid to voice the hope. Then maybe I can find a way to transition out. Legitimize everything. For us. The word us made Emma's heart race. They hadn't defined their relationship explicitly. How could they, given the circumstances? But in that moment, it felt real and solid and worth fighting for. How can I help? Emma asked. You already are, Dominic said, bringing her hand to his lips. You're giving me something to survive for beyond just existing. Their moment was interrupted by Dominic's phone buzzing urgently. He glanced at the screen, and his entire body went rigid with tension. What is it? Emma asked, alarm rising in her chest. A meeting. Tonight. All 3 of my lieutenants requested it urgently. He looked at her, conflict clear in his dark eyes. This could be it. The move against me. Don't go, Emma said immediately, fear gripping her. It's too dangerous. If I don't go, I look weak. And in my position, weakness is more dangerous than any trap. He pulled her close, holding her tightly. I have to do this. But Emma, I need you to promise me something. Anything. He pressed a card into her hand. If something happens to me tonight, if I don't call you by midnight, go to this address. It's a secure location. Inside is a package with your name on it. Cash, documents, everything you need to disappear and start over safely. Dominic, no. Emma's voice broke. Promise me, he insisted, his voice fierce. Promise me that if the worst happens, you'll save yourself, that you won't try to find out what happened or get involved. Just take the package and go. Please, Emma. Tears streamed down Emma's face. I don't want your contingency plans. I want you to come back to me. I'll do everything in my power to make that happen, Dominic said, pulling back to look into her eyes. But I need to know you'll be safe. That's the only way I can walk into this meeting and think clearly. Please. I promise, Emma whispered, though the words felt like giving up. Dominic kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then finally her lips. A gentle, desperate kiss that tasted of fear and longing, and all the words they hadn't yet said to each other. I love you, Emma Richardson, he said against her lips. I need you to know that. Whatever happens tonight, I love you. I love you too, Emma said, her voice breaking. So you have to come back. You have to. Dominic held her for one more long moment, then forced himself to pull away. Emma watched him drive off into the Chicago night, his taillights disappearing into the darkness, and felt like her heart was being torn from her chest. She went home and paced her small apartment, checking her phone every 30 seconds. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. She tried to distract herself. TV played unwatched. A book lay open but unread. She cleaned surfaces that were already clean. 11 o'clock came and went. Then 11:30. Emma sat on her couch, the card with the address clutched in her trembling hand. and prayed to a God she wasn't sure she believed in. At 11:58, her phone rang. "Dominic?" Emma answered before the first ring finished, her voice desperate. "It's me." His voice was strained, rough but alive. "I'm okay. Are you safe?" "Yes. Yes, I'm safe. What happened? Are you hurt?" "It was Vincent," Dominic said, and Emma could hear exhaustion in every word. "He was the traitor. He tried to set a trap, but Marco and Tony stayed loyal. We handled it. But Emma, this isn't over. Vincent gave information to rival groups before tonight. They know things. Safe houses, routes, schedules. They're going to move fast now." "Where are you?" Emma asked. "Somewhere secure, but I can't see you for a while. It's too dangerous. If these people find out about you, they'll try to use you against me." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't let that happen." "I'm not afraid," Emma said, though it was only partially true. "I am," Dominic admitted. "I'm terrified, because for the first time in my life I have something to lose that matters more than power or money or control. I have you." Emma pressed her hand to her mouth to muffle a sob. "How long?" "I don't know. A week, maybe 2. I need to consolidate, protect my people, shore up security. I need to make sure that anyone thinking of coming after me knows it's not worth the cost." He was quiet for a moment. "Emma, I need to tell you something in case I don't get another chance." "Don't talk like that." "I'm falling in love with you," Dominic said, the words rushing out. "Maybe I already have fallen. I know we barely know each other by conventional standards, but you've seen parts of me I've never shown anyone. You've made me want to be better, to believe that redemption is possible. And whatever happens in the next few weeks, I want you to know that you've changed my life. You've changed mine too," Emma said through her tears. "You've reminded me what it feels like to be alive, to want something enough to risk everything for it. So you have to survive this, Dominic. You have to come back to me." "I will," he promised. "I'm going to fight to survive this because I want a future with you. A real future where we can be together without hiding, without fear, without looking over our shoulders." "Then come back to me," Emma said. "Whatever it takes, come back." "I love you," Dominic said one more time. "I love you too." The line went dead, and Emma sat in her dark apartment clutching the phone to her chest. 10 days, possibly 2 weeks. It felt like an eternity. But if Dominic was fighting for a future with her, then Emma would wait. She would hope. She would believe that love could survive even in the darkest circumstances, because sometimes the most unlikely connections become the strongest bonds, and sometimes a person is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth believing in, even when everything seems impossible. Emma fell asleep that night with her phone next to her pillow, volume turned all the way up, and dreamed of a future where she and Dominic could walk down a street together in daylight, hand in hand, with nothing to fear but ordinary life. It was a fragile dream, threatened by realities she didn't fully understand, but it was hers, it was theirs, and she would hold on to it until Dominic came back to her.